Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous good-looking friends. Well, I can't stress this enough that Harry needs to be deported immediately. This last PR stunt really pissed me off because literally he is sticking his middle fingers up at our US soldiers and veterans who fought for the very same freedoms that we are so desperately trying to hang on to. Sit back and get comfortable because I'm about to expose and blow up Meghan and Harry's true grift. Before I get started, I would like to set the tone and tell everyone that this is not about the Democrats versus the Republicans. This is about the people that are associated with Meghan and Harry and what they have been doing. And, I can't help that the people that are associated are with one particular party. I can't change that. If there were other parties involved, sure, I would be reporting on it. But for our purposes here, the people that I'm talking about, it's because they are related to Meghan and Harry. This is not about attacking one party over the other. So I ask you to just see it for what it is. Let's get started. Now, if you had a moment to watch the video that I did earlier today, giving a quick status on Samantha Markle's court case, you would have seen this video of Meghan and Harry going about pretending to be royal in the United States in cutting ribbons for this military center. Apparently, and rumored that they were paid to be there as the guest celebrity, but posing as if they are royalty, gracing these folks with their presence. I know, vomit-inducing. I think it's insulting and we need to make more noise. And if this doesn't make you mad, let me share with you some more evidence of this domestic threat. Now, I uploaded this video last night for a reason. It's not because I support this candidate. It's not because I'm a Republican. It's because of what he was saying.
Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We'd have 10 times the viewership, asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about and bringing more people into our party. Do you think the Democrats, and we've got Kristen Welker here, do you think the Democrats would actually hire Greg Gutfeld to host a Democratic debate? They wouldn't do it. And so the fact of the matter is, Kristen, I'm going to use this time because this is actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment. Ask you, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years, was that real or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Roberts.
Sorry. This is how we get our country back. We need accountability because this media rigged the 2016 election. They rigged the 2020 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
and they're going to rig this election.
Your time is up.
Accountability.
Let me turn to Governor.
It is my belief, based on solid evidence that I'm going to present to you, to draw the conclusion that this guy, a prince of the UK on U.S. soil, was a part of the U.S. government's carefully crafted engine to control and censor speech online around various topics and issues such as election, vaccinations, race. Meghan and Harry were a part of it, supporting the Democrat Party. So here are a couple things that are facts that we need to keep in the back of our minds. Way back when Harry was with the royal family before they Mexited, it was Harry who was opening doors for Meghan. It wasn't the other way around. So Netflix took Meghan's calls, Spotify took Meghan's calls, Oprah Winfrey wanted to be her best friend. I mean, the world was Meghan's oyster, and anybody and everybody that Meghan called, you better believe she was getting a call back. So when we look at what was happening in the year of 2019, there were firm plans in motion, and I always believed that Meghan had no intention on staying, and it was her goal to come back to the United States. With her newfound global fame and her thirst for money and power, she honestly saw herself doing better in the United States and being queen of the world than standing behind Catherine for the rest of her days. She realized real quick that she never was going to be queen, and William was never going to leave his beautiful wife, Catherine. At that time, Meghan had power, and Meghan saw using that power to make money. So early on during this time, one of the things that always made me wonder as to how this choice came to be was the hiring of Sarah Latham. Sarah Latham, for those that don't know, was a former senior advisor on Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. But she also was brought in to help choreograph Bill Clinton's re-election campaign in 1996. So, after Clinton's successful 1996 reelection campaign, she then worked as special assistant to Chief of Staff John Podesta. And then from 1996 to 2000, she held other roles within the White House, including deputy assistant to the president and until 2000, deputy director of presidential scheduling. And after 2000, she moved to the UK and aligned herself with Tony Blair. Since leaving the UK government in 2006, she set up her own consultancy. Her clients reflected the Clinton Foundation and Tony Blair Associates, as well as Coca-Cola and the Nelson Mandela Foundation. So here's what I don't understand. If the monarchy is supposed to remain politically neutral, how is it that the institution hired Sarah Latham, who had such strong, deep ties to the U.S. Democratic Party and the New Labour Party in the UK? So after Harry and Meghan left in 2020, she then went on to work for Queen Elizabeth's private office, working on special projects for the late monarch, reporting to Private Secretary Edward Young. I found it odd that she would hire someone so politically controversial. Sarah Latham's name was found in Sleazy E's Black Book. Now, I've asked this question in the past as to why the Queen would hire someone like this, and many of you came back to say that, well, she probably hired her to get information on Harry and Meghan, particularly around Archie. My thought is, well, why didn't she just have MI6 and MI5 sit her down and get a full download on what she knows? Like, there would be no reason to hire unless it was for something else. And that's what has me, thinking about all these various things that we are seeing, the various people that the Hargles have aligned themselves with. I mean, we really don't know, but it makes you wonder, being that the royal family is supposed to be apolitical, and here we have this being allowed. And here they are in the United States, pretty much working for the Democrats. And the family has yet to say a gosh darn thing about it. At the time Sarah was working for Meghan and Harry, she was privy to the work that Meghan was doing with Omid Scobie for Finding Freedom. But all the press releases that were coming out were pretty much lying to our face. She had input in that communication or propaganda that was being pushed out into the world. So my question is, how much did the royal family really know about what was going on? I bet they knew a lot and allowed it to continue. And this is where, it does look bad for the royal family. Sarah Latham was complicit in helping Meghan cover up her lies because she was the senior comms manager. So everything around Archie's birth and the announcement, what you saw out into the world as far as media, when you think about who Sarah's former client was and what she was doing to help, you had Hillary Clinton, who at the beginning of her campaign tainted her opponent's campaign with this false disinformation in this Russian collusion narrative. So I wonder how much involvement she now had with that. But in any case, as one of Hillary Clinton's senior advisors on her presidential campaign, she most definitely had to have been aware of the plans to vilify Donald Trump and claim that he was colluding with Russia to win the election. This was a woman that the institution hired to be put as head of Meghan and Harry's comms team. My next question is, who made the suggestion that she would be a good fit? We need to know who from the palace advised Meghan that this was a good idea and approved the hiring. You see, they can't just hire someone like that. They have to go through HR. HR, I'm sure, has to do background checks, and approvals have to be made, most likely from the privy purse, around this woman's salary and benefits. So this was not a situation where Meghan and Harry hired this woman behind the backs of the institution. The institution had to have approved it. So now, given what we know about Sarah, could it be that she was the one that facilitated and coordinated getting this meeting together between Hillary Clinton and Meghan at Frogmore? I highly doubt Hillary Clinton would just fly over just because she has nothing else to do to coo over baby Archie. My guess is that this was a strategy session to help Meghan set up this Farswell Foundation, or understand how to set up the Farswell Foundation that mirrored and operated just like the Clinton Foundation. If you look at both of the foundations, they're quite similar in what they're doing. I also believe at that moment, I think the discussion around the elections must have came up, and Hillary recruited Meghan into this world of fighting disinformation, because ever since Hillary had lost the election, she's been hell-bent on getting censorship, blaming that the reason why she lost the election was because of all the Donald Trump misinformation bots, yada, yada. In 2017, Hillary Clinton started this push at Stanford University. She had been banging on that the election had been stolen and that we have to protect our democracy. I mean, there was a true effort globally to ensure that Donald Trump would not get back into office because he disrupted all the corruption that has been going on at the top with these globalists. And for the moment, folks, let's be real. Back in 2019, before the pandemic was released onto the world, the United States economy was up. There were jobs. People were eating. Gas was low. I mean, things were going well. Yes, Donald Trump was abrasive, and there were many people who were spewing out misinformation about him, brainwashing the public, to which, yeah, people didn't like him because of the narrative that was forcefully pushed onto us, controlled by the Democrats. And we know this now because it's all coming out in Congress. So this is not me making up conspiracy theories. This is what's being reported in Congress via these testimonies that are going on. So the theories that are out there was that, yeah, this pandemic was released onto the population to destroy the successes and growth that, Western countries were experiencing as a result of America being prosperous. I truly believe that the Democrats and all the liberal elites were afraid for Trump to get a second term. And, I know we had the pandemic, and I don't want to touch the topic on whether or not that was unleashed on us on purpose to destroy America and wipe away all the good that was done during the Trump administration. But I do think that there was a tremendous effort behind the scenes to manipulate the public. Not only was the U.S. government weaponized against its people, but the U.S. taxpayers were paying for it. So getting back to Harry and Meghan and how in bed they were at the time with the Democrats, Harry and Meghan make a secret visit to Stanford University to sit down with a few professors to discuss their foundation ideas and direction that they possibly could be taking. Now, if we are to believe the puff pieces, Harry and Meghan went to see James R. Doty, who is the director and founder of the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education at Stanford Medicine. Now, his background is quite interesting because not only is a surgeon, but he's also an inventor and entrepreneur, as well as a philanthropist who has multiple positions on, and I want to think that this is important to know, venture capital firms. Now, it's anyone's guess how this guy was chosen for Meghan and Harry to go sit down and talk about philanthropic ideas for their new foundation. I do believe that Sarah Latham, that's just my gut feeling, was the one who helped facilitate this. And possibly it might have been a recommendation of Tony Blair, because Tony Blair, his institute is aligned with Stanford. However they connected with this guy is anyone's guess, but I believe that he was a key figure early on in helping the Hartgells set up their impact investing and help them with connections as well as advice, perhaps. When you look at James Doty's Twitter account, you can see that he is connected to Tristan, Meghan's bestie from The Social Dilemma. Here he is on a panel with the general surgeon talking about social connection and mental health for youth. The same bandwagon that Meghan and Harry jumped on when we saw them in New York. More recently, he was part of a global summit with Gabor Mate. Or how about last year in participating in the Mental Healthcare Innovations Summit, sponsored by the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change and the Stanford Healthcare Innovation Lab, you have James Doty and Better Up. As you can see on the agenda, we have psychedelics. So we all know that something's being pushed here, but I'll leave that for you to draw your own conclusion. So is James Doty, the brilliant surgeon, entrepreneur, inventor, venture capitalist, wealthy, caring, compassionate human being? I think to a certain degree, he believes he's filled with mindfulness, kindness, and compassion. But I also think that there must be a return on investment for it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be sitting at a world government summit that is pushing us towards this one world government. So, right after their secret visit to Stanford, they went to the UK to finish out their last engagement, so we know what happened there. The rest of 2020, and I kid you not, it was nonstop daily from the time they got back to California till all the way to the end of December, in which for, a typical day, we'd have like maybe 6 to 10 puff pieces that they would put out. Not only from the Megxit situation and the drama that was going on with that, but then also Meghan and Harry's entrance into this political activism, aka what I now call the royal grift. I mean, who could forget Meghan seizing upon her newfound blackness in talking about George Floyd and lying to a group of students or graduating class of being at these LA riots and remembering what it was like when she was that day in Palm Springs with her father. Anyhow, one of many lies that Meghan has told to market herself as this activist and race baiter to cause division within the United States. And this is all part of the Democratic plan to make the environment look as bad as it can in order to demand for change for the better. And this was the platform that they were selling everybody on. And soon after that, Meghan then became this voice for encouraging youth, especially young Black women, to vote. And this was a campaign that Meghan was a part of, beginning with Hillary Clinton bestie, Glow Steinem, and this bullshit PR stunt of calling people, encouraging them to vote. Now, who actually believes that these two grifters got on the phone and called people to encourage them to get out there and vote for the Democrats? I, for one, don't believe it. I mean, if Meghan really was on the phone calling people, we would see her with a photo, with the phone to her head and a scratch paper checking off names. But no such thing happened, and if there's no picture, you can assume it never happened. So a couple of things that I want to point out here. So this ad for encouraging people to vote was dropped at the end of August 2020. Let's all remember that during that time, the country was in lockdown, especially California. I would like to know, how was this allowed, considering this was not a let's use our cell phones and film ourselves. There were obviously professionals there to take this photo shoot and video. Why is Meghan not wearing a mask and 90-year-old Gloria either? Two, was this filmed in August or was this filmed in July? Because if she filmed it in July, which I'm thinking, how is she looking so happy after having this so-called fake miscarriage? I'm just pointing that out. There was a hard focus by the media to slam the current president. As you can see here, Michelle Obama is speaking to Gayle King on CBS this morning. Also, at the same time, the announcement of Meghan Markle joining with Michelle Obama to help with voter registration in the nonprofit that Michelle Obama had been behind, which was this When We All Vote nonprofit organization targeting the youth, especially minorities. Now, before I get into the background of this and where the money is coming from, I'd like to pause and make this point that you need to keep in the back of your mind because it will be relevant later on. So back in October of 2020, Harry and Meghan put together this Time 100 Talks that was sponsored by P&G. And the people that they got together to talk about technology and how misinformation and disinformation is affecting society, as well as pushing the thoughts around needing regulation, as well as talking about elections and why elections matter and getting the truth out. We have Safiya Noble and Tristan Harris, Meghan's bestie, and then Harry talks to Renee DiResta at the end of this video. The reason why I bring this up is because these folks were a part of the Aspen Institute. This is the same Aspen Institute that's now also getting sued for suppressing speech and violating Americans' First Amendment rights. So keep in mind that this was done in September of 2020, but throughout this video, there is an understanding that these folks have been connected or engaged for a while. So Safiya Noble, Meghan and Harry had been working with her through the Archwell Foundation and giving funds, and I'll share the money trail on that one. But Harry had been engaged with Renee DiResta before they announced that he was on this Commission of Information Disorders. So there is evidence here that he was aware and saw the work that Renee DiResta was doing. I mean, he even admits that in this video call.
It's a group effort, and I and everybody else watching this can't thank you guys enough for all of the work that you continue to do, the research, the endless content that you have to go through to be able to find the truth or to be able to stop more of this from happening. But there's been quite a heavy subject for people to take on. So starting with you, Renee, and then moving on to Maria, what is that last piece of optimism and hope that you would leave everybody watching this now?
I think that really it's actually the civil society and researchers and government and the cooperation that we've built over the last few years leading into 2020 in particular, but since 2016. I think that, Maria is absolutely right. There is not accountability in the way that we need it to be. It's just not there yet. In the U.S. in particular, I know this is the optimism part, so I don't want to be too negative, but the very idea of a fact check is partisan now. It is perceived as censorship by vast swaths of the population. If somebody tells you what you've said is wrong, that is censoring your opinion, right? And then that is where we are. I think that one of the things that we try to do at Stanford is we do try to work with the platforms so that we can make constructive suggestions so that at least in the near term, we have a little bit more in the way of positive outcomes, particularly with these, pick whatever the next crisis is. I think on the optimism front, though, we are also seeing so much awareness from the public, which is demanding accountability, but more than that, which is recognizing that they also have some agency, not a ton, not as much as they need, but enough, I think, at this point where we're starting to see media literacy and efforts, as you mentioned, from the younger generation, where they are doing that lateral searching, really making an effort to try to find out what's true by looking, in a kind of plethora of places on the internet. And I think that as we continue to develop those programs and, the younger generation kind of continues to take over, we're headed in the right direction.
Well, so then how do we end up, and this is what we're all trying to find, is how do we help with the solution? Because how do you monitor, how do you police that? Is it enough, and I think I know your answer to this, for these platforms to be self-policing? Or if not, what is the solution? Where does the accountability fall? And how do we start to see that needle move in the direction of good and positive as opposed to where it seems to be now?
We know that public policy and regulation is absolutely crucial to these conversations about how business is conducted in the United States and abroad. Many governments have to contend with consumer harm, consumer safety around products. That's certainly one way in which it can be framed. We can also look at human rights and civil rights models of intervention that again happen at the level sometimes of governments and often at kind of civic society organizations. So I think it's complex. I don't think that the tech industry can regulate itself. It's a little bit like the fox guarding the hen house. And, so people like me, like longtime critics of big tech are, constituting things like the Real Facebook Oversight Board, ways to draw attention to.
I'm sorry, but these people really scare me. They feel so entitled to be the ones to come up with the solution on how to police people and keep these tech companies accountable. This is why they are in the shit that they are in now, because they thought that they could police people online expressing themselves, whether it be for what is happening with racial, social justice around Meghan Markle and calling her a liar, or talking about the election. And if you didn't support Biden, then you got kicked off the platform. This has to stop. I mean, seriously, this needs to be exposed. And the fact that Harry has been in the thick of it and he's not being called out should be troublesome and worrisome to all Americans, because he's still going and continuing to work with the very same folks that are pushing and lobbying to get these bills passed to censor Americans. This is a serious problem.
When tech tries to self-regulate, they actually indeed don't take any action. So I think those are, the solutions are complex. I don't think they just resolve by, individual onus that I have to put down my phone and somehow that will solve it. And I think that's one of the, ways we have to complexify the kinds of solutions that are being proposed, from a variety of different quarters.
And the insulting thing about what she's saying here about not trusting a person to have the self-discipline to put the phone down and shut it off, is so arrogant. And in my opinion, the fact that she focuses on talking about funding, meaning, yes, taking more money from the taxpayer to line her pockets. Oh, yeah, let's not forget that she was a part of the Shitflix mockumentary with Christopher Boozy in supporting the fight for Meghan's life and talking about all those online single-purpose hate accounts, supporting and backing Christopher Boozy's Fugazi report. So now they don't think that you can handle self-disciplining yourself, but at the same time, they want to push out false information. Exactly that. These people have no business speaking on this topic. And it scares me that they are the ones that have been responsible for a lot of this control that we've seen over the last couple of years, to a point where suppressing unfavored speech actually ended up hurting many people. Not only has it hurt this country, had people known about that Hunter Biden laptop, then they could have came to their own conclusion and make their own decision. Perhaps maybe it would have been different. But of course, they were afraid of that, and they didn't want people to make that decision. So suppressing that information took a person's right away to make up their own mind. Instead, they were force-fed false narratives and lies, and thus people's judgments were based off of that, which was manipulated. I don't see how that's freedom to come to your own conclusion and critically think if they want to control what you are being given to see, understand, learn, as well as decide is fact. This is the danger of having a thought police. You heard Meghan say, well, how do we police these platforms? Or the arrogance of these assholes, specifically Meghan, for saying, well, how do we change what people are receiving so it's right in the world? Like, just because you don't like what people are saying about you, then maybe you need to look at yourself first. Because the more that I read through this Missouri versus Biden case and going through the Judiciary Committee reports on the hearings that they were having, you only need to put two and two together to draw your own conclusion as to how involved they were and the roles that they were playing in influencing our election. So going back to this non-for-profit, When We All Vote, this was the non-for-profit that Meghan signed on to help Michelle Obama in getting people to take action. Well, let's talk about this organization, because would you believe that this organization is funded by dark money? So first, let's review the definition of dark money so everybody understands what these funds are used for. So dark money are funds raised for the purpose of influencing elections by nonprofit organizations that are not required to disclose the identities of their donors. So when we go back to When We All Vote, this organization is funded by the New Venture Fund, which is part of the left-wing dark money Arabella Advisors Network. So now let's get into the grift that we call philanthropy in the United States. So Arabella Advisors is a for-profit organization that is run by former Bill Clinton official Eric Kessler. He actually manages several nonprofit entities that include this 1630 Fund, Hopewell Fund, North Fund, and what we mentioned earlier, the New Venture Fund, which is what it had been funding When We All Vote. So these nonprofits, they contribute to a numerous amount of left-leaning groups and causes that support Democratic candidates. Remember when Harry and Meghan did this fake advertisement with these youth talking about the various grants that they were giving out to these individuals? Well, one of those that received this so-called grant was called the Log Off Movement. Now, the Log Off Movement and Design It For Us are connected together. These are two groups that lobby for tech regulation while describing themselves as being led by college students. So apparently, these groups are presenting itself as grassroots, but they are orchestrating these political campaigns at the behest of these left-wing mega donors. Here's another non-for-profit that is being funded by dark money through Arabella advisors that Harry and Meghan support, and that's Accountable Tech. Remember this organization, Paid Leave for All, in which Meghan wrote that letter to Congress in advocating for this group? Yep, this is another organization where dark money is coming from Arabella advisors. So what I think is happening here is Archwell is trying to set itself up as this type of fund, right? So the Archwell Foundation will become some type of fund in which it will contract most likely to Archwell Productions or one of their 11 shell companies that they've set up in which they could say that the company, let's say Cobblestone LLC, has been contracted to provide all their administrative support, like what they have here, in which now they have transferred money over into that entity in an offshore account. So nobody sees it and, they're off in a tax haven. I think that there is some money laundering going on here for sure with the way that Meghan and Harry have Archwell set up and just by watching the organizations that they're picking to give grants to. As you can see, it is clearly influenced by the Democratic Party in pushing the initiatives that they want to push that's destroying this country at the moment. So I can't understand why nobody has called this couple out and have jailed them yet, because I do think some of this stuff is illegal, especially how they're running this non-for-profit. But at the same time, they are investing into activities that are undermining our democracy. And that goes into the mess that we're seeing now with the Missouri versus Biden case that's gone to the Supreme Court. You better believe Harry and Meghan are tied to that shit show. Even though at this moment their names haven't come out, it will should Samantha's court case move forward, because what was happening to Samantha is the very same things that were happening to the folks that are now suing this group, the Renee DiRestas and Stanfords and so forth. I'm telling you, this is going to get interesting. We have to pray and hope that the judge sees that there's more to this case because of this bigger picture. And that's the bigger picture that I've been talking about. Now, I hope this wasn't too confusing. I know that the video has gone longer than it should have, but I felt that it was important to take everybody back through the journey as to how they got to where they are today and why the cases are connected, or at least the way I see have been connected, and how Prince Harry and Meghan have been deliberately trying to violate Americans' first, not even violate, take it away by working with these groups and trying to push their ideology and control onto the internet because they genuinely want to own it. And that's the truth. They know the power in controlling that. And they saw that during the election in what the Democrats did with controlling the information that Americans were allowed to see and, process to make their decision.
I guess my main concern is this. I think journalists around the world have done our jobs. We have held the line. We are telling you the facts, because without facts, you can't have truth. Without this, you can't have trust. Without any of these, democracy as we know it is dead. And I have been saying that for 4 years.
Here's the thing. I genuinely believe that this woman, who is the CEO of Rappler, believes in this ethos of how journalists should behave. But what is so off-putting about Harry and this woman, Renee DiResta, is that they had the leftist, liberal, mainstream media outlets all going towards a script and essentially lying to the American people. So while this woman from Rappler, in theory, is saying that this is how it should work, which I agree with her, you have two people here, particularly Harry, who believes in issuing out the narrative and controlling the narrative that he wants, even if it is lies. So that integrity that they're talking about doesn't exist here in the United States because our media is so flawed. Now, I think personally, it's not put regulation around the people. I think regulation now needs to go around the journalists for holding some type of accountability and responsibility for the reporting that they do because of the amount of influence that they have with the masses, especially on social media. You can't just go around pushing out lies and not have any type of consequence for it.
I think the last part is, with elections coming up in the United States, without facts, how can you have integrity of elections? With this kind of insidious manipulation that's happening online, how can voters choose, right? How can we know that this is the will of the people? I mean, these are huge issues, right? And I think we need a global collective to try to deal with this.
It's a war of information, right? One of which you've both been warning of for 5 years, more.
It's really, I became a journalist because I knew information is power and I wanted to fight for justice. We shine the light. That's the mission of journalism. This time shows you more than at any other time that information really is power. And what happened, what triggered it, is news groups lost our gatekeeping powers to technology, and technology abdicated responsibility for protecting the public sphere.
Beautifully said. Worrying, but beautifully said. Renee, sort of switching to you for a second. First, it's really nice to see you again after our first little meeting last month.
I know that this is going to come in handy for future. Keep that in the back of your mind. Harry met with Renee DiResta for the first time. If this was filmed or released in October, we could say that he met her around maybe end of August, early September, but that was the time frame. So well in the window of when they had been working on this election integrity, suppression, censorship that now is being heard in the Supreme Court. In fact, Safiya Noble was having meetings around that time pertaining to a lot of this stuff, or participating in this kind of work. So no doubt, as you can see here, it says September 8, 2020, this was in process, and this is what they were essentially doing.
But your work is also so impressive and so needed as well, as is your remarkable career of all the places where you've worked, all the places that you've been, and all the experience that you've gained from that as well. You don't just dig deep, you dig the deepest, as far as I can tell. And in most cases, into the really unpleasant areas, of which most other people certainly don't have to go to. But on that, thank you for what you do. Thank you to both of you for what you do. But this is really critical work that you're both doing. But Renee, you've informed policymakers, civil society leaders, academic institutions, and so many more. How have online platforms, and by extension some news outlets, enabled the spread of misinformation or propaganda?
Raise your hand, folks, if you think Harry knew about what was going on between our federal government working with Stanford and the work that Renee DiResta was doing with the Election Integrity Partnership. I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, so as Maria was describing, this bottom-up activism, originally social platforms were a way for people to connect with each other. And there was an explosion in extraordinary social movements that came about as a result of that in the early days, right? And so we don't want to imply that that act of connecting people, or that act of democratizing access, the ability to create content, the ability to disseminate it, the ability to bypass gatekeepers, candidly, to make your voice heard, particularly if you were a member of a community that didn't have access to press. This was a global phenomenon that happened on social platforms that they really enabled. But the downside of that, the unintended consequence, is when you connect everybody and when you make it possible for information to spread instantaneously, not everybody who is endowed with that power uses it responsibly. And so what you see is fake people begin to participate in the conversation. Fake media properties begin to spring up. Because as Maria mentioned, this is a tool of power. And if you can control the narrative and if you can dominate the share of voice, then you can achieve real world objectives. For a while, people talked about the internet or social platforms as this thing that happened over there. Yeah, there were conspiracy theories, but that was just on the internet. Yes, there was some, kind of wild claims and harassment, hate speech, et cetera, but that was just on the internet. Then we began to realize the extent to which what was happening online and offline, the tools of influence, the democratization of the ability to influence, and candidly, the democratization of propaganda meant that ordinary people could have a profound impact in shaping the direction of leadership, the direction of policy, and the direction that their country was going.
Here we have it again with these folks making this assumption that the wider public should not have the ability to have this type of platform as do journalists do. I mean, you heard what the CEO from Rappler had said earlier. She had said that now the journalists used to be the ones as the gatekeeper of, reporting and information, but now it's flipped and in the hands of, the everyday man. And I think it bothers her because as a journalist, she's trying to write stories. And of course, it affects her bottom lines because now we're dealing with clicks and so forth. But also, you have the journalists who report propaganda, which is what Harry and Meghan do. And they would rather control that and hold on to what people see and take in and consume than having the opportunity to explore other options, other people talking, other ideas to come to their own conclusion because they want a specific narrative forced down your throats. And this is what China looks like. You see, Harry and Meghan really do understand the power of having control over the media. We have seen over the last 6 years how they weaponized using the media to attack their family, attack their critics, and nothing's happened to them. And quite frankly, I believe that they do feel like they are gaining some sort of power by putting in these or pushing for these policies and control, especially Harry. He called our First Amendment bonkers. We need to believe him in that and believe that he is threatening our Constitution by doing all of this.
I think we all agree media is a huge responsibility and it is a huge power and it's a privilege. But the moment that it gets taken out of responsible hands, then you have sort of uncharted territory, chaos.
This is the thing that's scary about Harry. He fully understands this concept.
I think that's accurate. And I think a lot of where we are today is thinking about, we have a brand new information environment. It's only about, 10 years old or so, the social web. And whereas whenever there's a new technological tool for the dissemination of information or propaganda, there was kind of like a period of social upheaval while the world, while societies kind of began to understand how they could use it, what it was for, and where regulators began to think about how they would address it. And I think that we're in that pivotal period right now, trying to understand how to take the good and minimize the chaos, if you will, and achieve an environment where people do have that freedom of expression, that ability to connect without some of the unintended downstream harms that we've seen manifest as a result.
And what is the real effect of misinformation? What is it actually doing to us?
If Samantha's case moves forward and this goes to discovery, in my opinion, Harry's in trouble. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
It was such a fraud.